Hello, good morning, and good afternoon to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Megan will include you as being part of the world in that. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunchtime with us. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Lawtrades, and our fantastic presenters today, featuring Michael Molina, Ashish Walia, and Megan Niedermeyer. We're going to teach us the do's and don'ts for scaling our legal team. This is our 84th webinar of the year. And I'm wondering, are you here for the first time or have you tuned into an IHC webinar before? We have a rockstar panel, which include people who have grown legal teams and could help you grow your legal team, starting with Michael Molina. Mike is the Vice President of Legal and Deputy General Counsel for Flock Safety, a public safety as a service company that builds ethically designed crime-solving technologies. Mike leads this groundbreaking Y Combinator-backed startup that recently announced a $100 million Series F fundraising effort, which totals over $480 million in raised capital in order to reduce crime in America. Mike is joined by Megan Niedermeyer. Megan has a diverse work experience spanning various roles and industries, and she's currently the Chief Legal Officer at Apollo.io, a sales intelligence platform. And last but certainly not least, our moderator for today's discussion is Ashish Walia, who is the co-founder and COO of Lawtrades. Lawtrades is a tech-enabled platform that makes it easy to hire top legal talent on demand when you need it. Wonderful to have Ashish, Megan, and Mike on with us today. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Ashish to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shai, and thanks for In-House Connect for having us. Shai, like you mentioned, it's been a long time coming since we've been able to do something with In-House Connect, and just want to say thanks for the opportunity. And we definitely look forward to supporting and engaging with this community even further. It seems like such an awesome group from so many different parts of the country. But yeah, with that said, happy to dive into the conversation. And this topic is all about how to scale your legal team to meet the growing demands of today's fast-paced business environments. Everyone's looking to hire more talent, and as companies grow, of course, the complexity and the volume of legal work increase. You need more specialized expertise, better processes, creative solutions to get more headcount. And today we'll be diving into all of those challenges. And of course, like Shai said, we have some awesome panelists that have really played a critical role in growing and scaling their legal teams from different companies and have such an awesome track record. I'm so excited to hear their insights and be able to share them with you all. As Shai mentioned, feel free to keep the questions coming in. We want to make this very free-flowing and engaging and value-adding. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Mike for an intro, then to Megan, and we'll dive into the conversation. So Mike, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. Appreciate it. So Mike Molina here. I work at a company called Flock Safety. So it's a tech startup based out of Atlanta. I typically work from the comfort of my home in Brooklyn, New York. And essentially, we're making crime fighting technology. And what that looks like is software and hardware applications. So on the software side, we're essentially designing a real-time crime center that sits on a single pane of glass for law enforcement. And the idea is we can create devices that can hear gunshots and alert local police department when a firearm has been discharged, as well as creating license plate reading cameras that are on the lookout for stolen vehicles wanted in connection with crimes, amber alerts, silver alerts, that sort of thing, packaging it all up and selling it to cities, municipalities, law enforcement officers, and the commercial space, so that with the interest of public safety.
Awesome. Megan, you want to go next?
Very cool product. Hard to follow that kind of product. My name is Megan Niedermeyer, Chief Legal Officer at Apollo.io, sales intelligence software platform. And probably why I'm here today is I've grown out 3 legal teams pretty much from scratch over the last 8 years. I've been really fortunate, and I've also been full of mistakes. And so hopefully I can pass along some of these mistakes as part of this webinar to share some of my experiences, so maybe you can avoid the pitfalls I've fallen into.
And Megan, is this your 3rd unicorn or very close to being your
third
unicorn?
Unicorn, which, I don't know what unicorns are going these days, but there's inflation from prior unicorns, deflation.
That's awesome. Congrats on all the success to both of you guys. And it's been a pleasure working with both of you for the past few years now. To start off the topic, one of the challenges that I would imagine a lot of folks here in this room have is really making the case to hire more talent for your internal team. And it's something that I'm sure a lot of folks deal with in making the case. Frequently, lawyers are viewed as a cost center. And I hear countless times through my interactions with folks at Lawtrades that making the case to hire permanent talent just becomes so difficult and it's hard to figure out where to get started. So Megan, why don't we start with you? When you're making the case, what's top of mind for you? What are some of the key metrics or arguments that you found pretty effective in convincing your teams that you need to grow and scale your legal team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think like one of the mistakes I used to make early on is assuming everyone understood why we needed another lawyer or another resource on the legal team. And especially for business folks who maybe aren't lawyers and you're making the case to somebody that doesn't just organically understand why X area of law is going to blow up and require more work and more kind of horsepower behind it. Connecting the needs on your legal team to the business outcome is really essential. Hey, it's not just that I need a contracts administrator. It's I know that we're talking about bringing in 50 more vendors for this big partnership we're doing on the product. And in order to get those done really quickly and really efficiently, we probably are going to need to staff up to do that. So this new product development is going to actually have its origin with a contracts administrator, a contracts counsel, something like that. Tying that business outcome is really essential. And then there's a second way to also grow your team. So one is tying those business outcomes, making sure everyone understands the why behind the what. But the second piece is really cost savings. Hey, this is our budget. Here's how much we've already been spending on this area. I actually think if we bring it in-house, if we outsource it to a talent platform like Lawtrades, that we're going to save incrementally versus the hourly rates we're paying to maybe a law firm partner today. And we're maybe going to get more out of it. That person, once they become a little bit more folded into the team versus being an external provider, can actually advise us in many more ways than one. So one is that business outcome. The second is that budget constraint.
Right. Mike, I think when we first met, you were the only lawyer at Flock Safety, maybe like a year and a half ago. My timing might be a little off, but yeah, walk me through how you were able to make the case for increasing your team to what it is now.
Yeah, let me set the stage for everyone. So at the time that I joined the company, I was probably just around the 100th employee. I was the first legal hire there, first attorney on staff. Since then, I've been there 4 years. We've grown to just over 1,000 employees, and I've grown the team to 10 of us, 10 attorneys. For us, what was important was scaling at the same exponential rate, slightly slower, but as the sales team, as the revenue organization, right? And to Megan's point, a lot of that was trying to make the business case that, hey, if we do not have enough lawyers on staff because we're commercial driven, this is going to drive and elongate the sales cycle. So bringing it back to that, to say there is not enough human power here right now with the amount of account executives who are doing great work and therefore are creating this pipeline and therefore need an attorney at the very end, right at the contracting stage to bring them on. In terms of how I made the case, anecdotally, what it ended up being was Flock Safety felt the burn because I took a couple of days off after the first few years that I was there alone. And I think it was quite literally took a couple of days off of my birthday, came back. And at that point, the CEO was like, when you get back, can you do that job description? Because it became very obvious to us that we do not have succession planning here. And at that point, that's when it became obvious that more help was good. And that's how we earned a headcount.
It's funny though, as lawyers, we try so much to control risk and prevent risk. And so we're always thinking very like client service oriented. Hey, I want to do coverage. I don't want anyone to feel the burn, but actually allowing people to feel the burn and feel the pain is sometimes the thing that's needed to help transform the understanding of actually, we need to staff up here. This is directly related to business outcomes. I understand now even more deeply what legal does, and we need to resource it.
Seems like the audience is agreeing with you too. And one of the things that's top of mind for me is, Mike, you gave a really good example of almost having to be reactive and coming back, hearing from your CEO, and then immediately trying to hire folks. Megan, do you find that you're generally very reactive to the business needs and immediately jumping the gun to hiring folks? Or how early are you planning out your future needs from the more proactive standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I always tell my team, I never want us to be at the forefront of resourcing our team to drive an initiative. If legal is fully staffed up for something, but the revenue operations team or the product team is not fully staffed to go do it, that's actually really inefficient. We have not done our job because we should almost trail a little bit of, hey, we see our business colleagues are going this direction, and we're going to go as far as we can with our current staffing until we see that it's breaking, we see that it's going to break. Only then will we add more folks in to help supplement what we already have. I think that's really important, because if you are leading the charge in building your team, you're going to find that a lot of your colleagues say, hey, why is legal so well staffed while we over here on product or we over here on engineering are still trying to figure out what our direction is going to be? There's so much that changes in a business, from strategy to vision to the way we're going to get there, how we're going to compete with our number one competitor. All that stuff has to be worked out before legal is going to go pile some great lawyers, great contracts administrators on top of it. So I find that piece, that time delay, is actually really useful.
And Megan, one follow-up there is, when you joined Apollo, I think you were the first lawyer there, if I'm not mistaken.
Second time I've been the first lawyer. Yeah.
Maybe walk me through, what were some of those first few hires that you made? Were they the same? Is there a consistent playbook that you try to stay with when you're going that route of building up the team?
Great question. A little bit of background. I started early days at my first in-house gig, not expecting I would be the head of legal. And as the third attorney, grew a team to over 45 in the course of 2 years of compliance operations, non-lawyers. Next time around, first general counsel, in-house counsel at 5tran, grew that team to over 30 in 2 years. And at Apollo, also was the first in-house attorney, and we now have a team of 7 or 8 folks. And so when I think about building and scaling that team from like 0 to 10 or 0 to 1, for me, it is, I know at my core, I will always have a bunch of random work that hits our plate that I need a great general athlete to go tackle. And so for me, the very first hire I made at 2 places now really was someone who was a general athlete. Legal operations, in my mind, great general athletes, great way to counter that very lawyerly, cerebral, thoughtful processes we sometimes live in, with somebody who can go block and tackle. How is Salesforce set up? How are we going to connect this? How are we going to get data reports? How can we train the sales team on this one issue? And my first hire at Apollo, most recently, legal operations, and I could not be more thrilled. I also think that when you're hiring for that first person that's scaling beyond you, whether you're a counsel who's in charge of a subject matter or you're a general counsel who's in charge of everything legal, you really got to think about 2 things. That first hire, one, what are the areas that you're weakest in, but the business really needs? Huge self-awareness exercise, but hiring for your own personal weaknesses, I think, is just really underrated. It can power that whole team to be so well-rounded. That takes a little bit of examination. Hey, what are the things I'm strong at? And what are the things I'm not so strong at? And of the things I'm not strong at, which ones of those is the business model going to really need to rely on, and I need to shore up my skills there? But the second thing to hire for, that first hire, is personality. I always like to say you can teach people a lot of subject matter in the law, in contracts, in anything that hits our plate. What you can't really teach, though, is attitude. So somebody who is along for the ride, game to learn, growth mindset, can build collaboration with your partners. They are an extension of your brand, right? They're an extension of legal's brand. How can you find somebody that's going to smooth out the edges that we all naturally find, instead of creating more edges?
Right. Mike, what about you? When you were building up the legal function there at Flock Safety, what were some of those original hires that you made, or first hires that you made?
Yeah, Megan hit it right on the head. So I hired for my weaknesses. I realized that I did not need a clone of myself that would not be necessarily beneficial to the company. And I didn't need someone that thought exactly like me, because then I'm just in a legal echo chamber, right? So the first person I hired who's still with me, there were 2 things that I did. One of them was completely self-interest. I was practicing it. I'm in New York. My company was working on East Coast and West Coast at the time. And I was like, I want somebody on the West Coast, someone with a different background. Of course, hired this person. We're all working from home. She's, I want to work East Coast hours. So that one backfired on me. But aside from that, some of the weaknesses that I knew that I had was going to be on the corporate space and the privacy space. And that was, at that time, I found Kim, who's still with me today, as I mentioned. She was at Sony, just the perfect complement to the type of work that I was doing. And I knew that she liked that work. So if I could bring her in and she enjoyed doing that, then it would take the stresses off of me for doing work that I just was not as enthusiastic about. So I think that a lot of it since then has been calculated on where are we hiring for the gaps in our team, and then completely agree, personality fits and personality adds. So during our last legal offsite about a year or two ago, we came up with the traits that we want to create, that we want to hire for. So we created almost a model. And what the common denominator ended up being was we just want humble hard workers. Because when you're starting a company and you're one of two, one of three, one of four to a company of 1,000, you're going to end up doing work that you might consider grunt work that you may not have done at a firm or that you may not have done in a bigger company, right? You have to be okay with being in the trenches with the sales team as well, and with other departments of one, and just getting the work done.
Yeah. One other thing to add with making those first hires is whether you are building out a subject matter expertise of a larger legal team or maybe just legal team from scratch or something in between, it's so important to get the buy-in of the 4 or 5 people that this person is going to work most closely with outside of the legal team. Where I see things go off the rails often is like legal wants to hire this specialized role or this non-specialized role. And we are in our legal echo chamber telling each other what this person's going to do, what their job scope looks like, what we're going to look for, what experience we think they need to have. But if we haven't brought in the people outside of the legal team that are going to be working most closely, they feel totally out of the loop. They're going to be given a brand new partner to have to work with, where legal's going to say no just naturally a couple times, like there are some things we just can't do, or this is not going to work. And so making sure you've got that non-legal partner as part of the interview process, spending time with them as you scope the job description, bringing them along on the journey so that when the person joins, they're really set up for success themselves, and that partner is set up for success to work closely with legal. That just is exponential in the impact that the role is going to have versus throwing a lawyer on somebody who didn't want one, doesn't know what they're going to do, is confused how to work together.
And if you put them on the panel, listen to them. Right. So at one point we're hiring for a product counsel. You need to have the product team, like certain members of them on this panel. And if someone is telling you, I don't think they're going to be a good fit, they're already raising that yellow flag. And even if you love that person as a candidate, you have to take the advice of the people that you brought on. Don't just bring them on for the show of it. You need to actually consider, because they're the ones who are probably going to work more closely with them day in and day out.
Awesome. This all makes a lot of sense. And one question I have that I think is particularly relevant for this current macro environment that we're in is a few years ago, companies were doubling and tripling their revenue every single year. The VC dollars were flowing in, companies were hiring like crazy. And then I think at the start of 2023, 2020, there was certainly a slowdown. Like budgets had shrunk a little bit, growth rates have stalled across a lot of the major tech verticals. And it's obviously a little bit harder to make the case for hiring people when there's hiring freezes and there's layoffs across a lot of parts of the organization. I'm just curious if when going through that journey for each of you, and if there were budget constraints, like how did you navigate and make the case around hiring during those circumstances? Or did you guys just decide, hey, we're just going to rough it out and ride out this macro wave before we end up putting our foot on the gas with hiring again?
Yeah, this is where kind of cost saving measures when you're hiring can really come into play. So we work with flexible talent models where it's a contractor who we can flex their hours really high if we feel like we've got the budget and the business need, but we can also really pare them back if we are in extreme budget like scrutiny zone, which I've been in before. It's not fun to get that finance team and the CEO really doing every line item, but that's where these flexible talent models are so helpful because you're proving out that there is work to be done, that the work is valuable, that it's ongoing, but you've got the flexibility to go down in really tight times. So I'd say like that piece is really important. I also have taken a lot closer look at my outside counsel bills, and I really try to take a lens of, hey, what here is actually not specialized and worth that $1,500 to $3,000 an hour? I want to be paying those rates for things that are specialized, high impact, like high risk. I don't want to be paying those rates, even for paralegals outside counsel, to do things that are day to day, that are going to be part of our business model regardless. Those things that we're going to have to do as a business constantly, we got to learn how to do those in-house. We got to bring them in-house. We got to find an external kind of provider contractor who can do it for truly 1/5 the rate. And we can integrate them a little bit more and give them that context. So I think those two kind of pieces I've thought of. The other thing is there's a lot of work that just happens in a company. And it can live in lots of places, right? So sometimes we've got this idea that something that has risk or compliance attached to it has to live in legal. It doesn't. There might be somebody else on the HR team or on your operations team who's doing adjacent legal work. Find somebody you can adopt and help like work through others who may not even be on your direct team. They don't have a direct reporting line, but there are ways that you can influence their roadmap, what they're prioritizing. You can educate them. You can explain to them why some of these cool new laws are happening and how it impacts our business. And you'd be surprised how much you can get leverage wise out of folks that aren't even on your team.
That all sounds good. Let's jump to the recruitment strategy here. One of the questions that seems to be common amongst our chat here is, in terms of recruitment strategy, how did you decide whether or not an attorney first or a non-attorney in, say, like a paralegal or legal ops function? What was the thought process there? And any tips or advice on finding that first legal ops hire? Sometimes they come from very different backgrounds where maybe they were a paralegal at first, or even an attorney that switched over to legal ops. Megan, my follow-up to you is, when you made that first hire within legal ops at your company, what did you really look for that function? And then we'll jump over to you, Mike.
Yeah, and I would say legal ops is a relatively kind of new industry. And so you won't find a lot of people who have been doing it for 25 plus years, because what we called that back then was paralegal, contracts administrator, project manager. And so I think that is one thing where don't let the title of their prior jobs dissuade you from thinking that they can be in a legal ops role, because it's a relatively kind of new function that's being built out. The thing you have to look at is, what does the business actually need? Do you need a general athlete and you're not sure what you need? Do you need like distinctly a contracts administrator because you've got just high volume paper cuts hitting you every day? Do you need a really savvy project manager who can go in and run large scale initiatives, change management, technology, new processes? Or do you need a little bit of both? I got extremely lucky. Shout out to Brenda, who is phenomenal as a
He's
legal ops
awesome.
professional. She's so great. And she has a real deep background as a corporate paralegal. I can throw equity stuff her way. I can throw corporate subsidiary stuff her way. But she also is really talented in legal ops, managing the transition from one system to another, implementing technology, gathering together feedback and input from diverse stakeholder groups, and distilling that into a project plan. And they're out there. And they may not be called legal ops, may be called project manager, corporate paralegal. I think what it comes down to for me is someone who's a really great communicator and who can manage the expectations of everybody else outside of legal. That is really key.
Mike, anything you want to add there about going the legal ops route first, or when you did go the legal ops route, like what was going through your mind at that time and thinking, like, this is the hire we need to make right now?
My legal ops manager was amazing and has saved my legal team more than once, was the fourth hire. So brought in a few attorneys. We needed folks, boots on the ground, to do the advice and counsel work. And then once we realized that there was three of us potentially looking to hire some more attorneys, we realized that we needed a little bit more organization. And that's what I mean by saved us. So she was thinking of a way to create processes to keep us organized without slowing down. When we talked about before, whether we're proactive or reactive towards a hire, at this point, I was being proactive. I was thinking down the pipeline and thinking, okay, I have kind of people working in silos. I need someone to bring this team together in a way that's going to streamline revenue operations, streamline our communication with customers. We have evidence management that our customers are asking us for. We have law enforcement asking us for different things. So the inbound requests were getting voluminous. So it was important for us to bring someone in that can create those workflows. So, and the way that we're able to talk about those budget constraints, at this time, what I was focused on doing was playing to the culture for the rest of my C-suite. And what I know that my team cared about was optimizing for speed. So if you're optimizing for speed, and I know that not having a legal ops manager is going to slow us down, then we can help you find the money to help keep us optimized for speed. And that was the play. And once we brought that, we realized that in a way, she's not just solely indebted to the legal team. She's just as much in the revenue team meetings. She is talking to our customers. She is outside talking to just all different departments and then bringing that back in and creating these little projects for herself and running without a lot of direction.
Right. Mike, we'll keep this on you, but when it comes to recruitment, I know that when at least internally in Lawtrades, anytime we post a job right now, there are hundreds and hundreds of applicants to go through. And building a pipeline is incredibly challenging because there's a lot of folks out there looking for more work. And I know that you're a master networker, so I'm very curious to hear about how you think about building your pipeline of talent. What are you relying on in terms of finding the next attorney or contract manager or paralegal to join your team? Walk me through maybe your pipeline process.
Yeah, so we're lucky enough to have a pretty robust recruitment team within the company, because there are some really specialized roles. When you think about, again, I mentioned we're hardware, so we have some really specialized engineering needs. Right? We make cameras. There's certain specialist people that are just really good at camera lenses. So because of that, we knew early on like we needed recruiters on both sides, the engineering side of the house and then the support staff side of the house. So when we're looking at pipeline, what we're doing is, much like how I talked about during that legal offsite, creating the keywords of the individual that we were looking for and creating the keywords for the candidate that we're looking for, partnering with my recruitment manager and saying, I know this person exists. Here are the keywords to go find this person in all of our networks and the LinkedIn tools. And when we're getting those inbound hundreds of applications for one job posting, these are the words that I want you to be thinking about as we are manually reviewing every single resume that comes through our door, and making sure that we're not missing anyone through any automated processes. So because of that kind of digging for the talent, we're making sure that we're also not digging without a goal or digging without knowing exactly what we're looking for. And then sometimes there are surprises. There's, wow, I wouldn't expect this person to fit with this background to fit all of the needs of our team. They sound interesting. Schedule a call. So a lot of it has been a little bit of headhunting on our end of folks that we have found, but also giving the recruitment team the playbook to make sure they're pulling out those gold nuggets from the pile.
Megan, anything you want to add there about building your pipeline?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I take a little bit of a different attack than Mike, which is I am like just very involved in all of the recruitment, interviewing, and not to say that you're not, Mike, but I don't have the luxury to be able to rely on a recruiting team who's able to do the level of digging that it sounds like your team can. And maybe the first is ABB, always be building. Even when you're not building your team, you're actually building your brand, which is going to build your team in the future. And the role might not be open now, but 6 months, 12 months from now, when that role is open, you want to understand who in your network can recommend people, who has a profile that is similar to what you're looking for. How do you think about skill sets and progressive experiences? And I've found that I have not been able to rely on my recruiting team for that a lot. So I've had to really dig down deep and roll up my sleeves. I'd say that I have oscillated on this topic, and I'd be curious even among the group, because what people find for legal jobs, I've started from a place of not wanting to do practical interviews and exercises in an interview process. And I've actually turned myself towards the very other end of the spectrum, which is now I really like doing practical exercises for everybody I hire for, because I think it's a great way to figure out how somebody problem solves in real life. And so it doesn't mean it's going to be a 2-week big treatise and review and write this document, but I try to make a practical exercise component part of all of my hiring, attorneys and non-attorneys alike, because I want to understand how people learn and how people communicate. And so for me, that is also a big piece of the recruitment process, because I find that area is where I can really kick people out or really bear hug them in, because I see them in real life and how they problem solve and how they can work through things that they don't know. Because at the end of the day, you get in the role and you're going to not know a bunch. We're all going to not know a bunch. And so how you act when you don't know something tells me a lot.
We're getting the questions pouring in. This is awesome. Let's jump to retaining talent and how we think about that. One of the questions that Kim Jones asked is, how do you offer career progression within a smaller team? I'm always transparent in interviews that there is professional growth, but not necessarily title changes on a regular basis. And of course, folks that are joining these new roles, title changes, salary bumps, and career advancement are such a big deal for them in order to keep them around. So how do you think about that when it comes to retaining top talent? Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, at a startup phase, one of the flexible things that you do have is title. So that's one of the things that we've been able to, as folks on my team have been promoted over the years. It actually has not been, here is your title. It has been, what would you like your title to look like? And I think being open with those conversations invites them into their own career progression, and they get buy-in, right? Because whereas a smaller company may not be able to have the same exact compensation, OT, and benefits as a larger company, there are some things that you can pull levers with, and title is one of those, right? The title is not going to hurt you, but it could really help them and try to either help them pivot into something they want, or help them progress where it would have taken them a longer time to get a more advanced title at a bigger shop. And what I mean by the pivot part is, remember I talked about the attorney who I brought in that then just liked privacy. Well, when she was promoted, we talked through what it would look like. And then what her title that she chose was senior counsel, comma, privacy and technology, right? And it was because she wanted to have an outward indicator to other opposing counsel that she was speaking with that this is her expertise. And also for internally, when people were reaching out and they're looking through our org chart, they're like, oh, this is okay, lawyer, and then the privacy lawyer, I need to go to them. So it was an easy way to get some buy-in without even having to necessarily give up much. And then the other thing that is important is diversity of work. As you get into bigger companies, the slice of the pie and the types of work that you do ends up becoming thinner, right? You end up becoming slightly more specialized. The interesting thing about being in a small legal team is you just have to do everything and figure everything out. Much to the general athlete idea, you are going to have to learn at least a little bit about a lot of different things. And because of that, you may progress here faster because you're going to become, if your path is general counsel, you may be able to get the general part of the counsel right here at this job. And then lastly, I think it's the opportunity for learning and development. You have to either fight and claw out for that budget to allow these legal professionals to obtain their CLEs, to attend conferences, to meet other interesting folks, to become thought leaders in their space. And if they have the space to do that with a really good title that they like, and they're doing all types of interesting work, they're going to stay and they're going to feel like they're advancing their career while at your shop.
Right. Megan, anything you want to add there? Your general thoughts on retaining talent?
Yeah, I love, Mike, how you talk about bringing them into the conversation around their title. That's really awesome. It's a two-way street, and ultimately, these individuals are in charge of their own career. And I think like having conversations with them openly of, hey, you're the driver here. I'm the passenger that's helping you navigate is a really important aspect to it. I'm at a company that is very strict on titles, so I don't have the ability to do a ton with titles, but I do Mike's idea around, hey, you're the counsel for comma. What is your specialty if that's something that you are interested in doing? I find that a lot of people's career progression, what they want to be able to do is talk outwardly and show outwardly about the growth that they've achieved or the specialization that they're in. We focus on having professional development budgets where people can get certified in IAPP certifications or other specialty certifications. And I think that's a really great way to both hand them the keys and say, hey, if you want to go be a privacy expert, here you get one of these a year. You've got to self-study for it, but choice is yours, and you've got all of the support from us to go be a specialist in that area. I find also that when people are doing career conversations, we often have it organically, in the course of our one-on-ones, but sometimes people forget that they actually had a career conversation with you. And when it comes time 6 months later to answer a poll at the company, does somebody care about my career? It's, I don't know. I don't really know. You're right. Maybe not. And so what I try to do is name those career conversations really intentionally. Hey, every quarter we're doing an intentional career combo, ICC. Here's our template document. There's 5 areas we checked in before. Let's check in on those 5 areas again, because you really got to brand those conversations so people remember that they happen. They remember that you care. They remember that you're focused on not just the day-to-day things that you need out of them, but on their longer term career.
That's a really good tip. I'm going to steal that from you, Megan. One thing I was curious about, and just to get your perspective on, is are either of you doing team onsites? How are you making the case for it? And what are the things you're doing to bring the team together? And how frequently are you doing that? So I'm assuming both of you are fully remote.
Totally. We've all been through the COVID era of virtual activities, and I'm actually bringing that back a little bit because I have a fully remote team. And so we did a virtual cookie making exercise for someone's baby shower on our team as they were leaving to parental leave. And so we got mailed, which is a separate issue. We got mailed a bunch of white powder in a box to go make cookies with. But things like this, I think they're actually relatively inexpensive. If you do one of these a quarter, it's a great way to get together and not focus on the work. The thing I'm finding actually more helpful almost than team offsites, which we still do. We'll do 2 team offsites a year, one with the broader G&A team because they're our very close partners, and one just with our legal team. But even more so than that is sending my team members to other teams' offsites. Hey, is the sales team doing an offsite somewhere? And my commercial counsel should really go. She needs to build the relationships with those folks, understand their pain points, hear about the strategy shifts. And so making sure that as you hear about other teams' offsites, you attach that legal team member, whether they're legal ops or contracts administrator or one of your counsels, send them. That's a career perk. It's fun. They get to meet more people. It smooths the work out.
Awesome. One thing we do is museum storytelling tours. So there's a site called With Confetti. So we use that as a way to just take a break from work, especially when we're all virtual and if we aren't meeting on site in the near term. So I would tell people to check that out. It's a pretty cool experience. Mike, what about you? How are you guys thinking about in-person collaboration? How frequently are you doing it? And what tips do you have?
Yeah, so our annual was actually 2 weeks ago. We usually try to get a nice destination that makes everybody really look forward to it. I think there's a lot of value in at least once or twice a year having everyone together in one room. It's not just about having a working meeting, but it really is about filling the gaps in the conversations, checking in on each other, finding out if someone is actually 6'1" or 5 or 5'5" because you haven't met them in real life. There's just something different about being in the room, being able to collaborate together. Old fashioned in terms of that. We do the quarterly, either quarterly different events. We'll send either cocktail making or some type of baking something to each other. And we do that in terms of celebrations as well. But none of them ever compare to getting in the room together. And then especially what we'll also try to do is if there is some type of flock event in your city. We've done road shows. We'll have different forums in the area saying, get out of your house for a little bit or get out of the WeWork for a little bit. Like the company is going to you. They're going to be doing a big event in your city or a conference in your city, or we're meeting with customers, or maybe you want to do a ride along and go with one of the technicians as they install some of our products live in the field in real life, right? Like giving them the opportunity to meet other, what we call flockers, other colleagues that they would not have otherwise met and hung out with, and get away from their laptop for a little bit, gets a little bit more buy-in too, because they see themselves as part of the company and not just in a virtual world.
That all sounds great. And let's jump to team management and efficiency. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about your communication style. How do you think about delegation? And yeah, we could start there and dive in a little bit deeper. Megan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I think like part of this is what rituals does your company follow and how do you bring those down to the legal team level? Like ultimately at the end of the day, the reporting structures, and by that, are you on OKRs? Are you doing monthly like functional updates? Is there a, every week newsletter you're expected to send as a legal department? Figuring out those rituals at the top and then flowing them through your team. I try to make sure that we do regular team meetings. I do one-on-ones, I do skip level one-on-ones, all of the classic just team management. But when it comes to legal management, if people want to grow in their career, they're always going to be taking on new areas that they've never done before. Maybe I haven't done it before either. So figuring out what those new areas are and partnering maybe more closely on those than the repeat areas where you feel really confident, they feel really confident. And delegation and monitoring and autonomy is not a one size fits all, even for the person. It might be based on the topic that they're working on today. Hey, this one we're both going to go really deep on, or this area you're absolutely flying on your own and we feel great about it.
Mike, what about you? And one thing I'd be curious to dial in on is this aspect of giving negative feedback. So I'd be curious to hear about how you approach those scenarios where maybe you have someone on your team that's making mistakes or potentially underperforming. How do you address those issues internally?
Yeah, we do have one-on-ones, and in one-on-ones, those are weekly meetings, and they're driven by the direct report, right? This is their time to either say what's bothering them, what's working, what do they want to do in their career. But what's important for me is that this is the way I operate. But during that time, as we're talking about career advancement and what's worrying, that to me is actually not the time to do if I'm considering constructive feedback. If I have something, a big topic to talk about, I don't want to rain on that parade. I will schedule a second thing. And if it needs to be addressed or if there's a broader issue, I do want to separate them because I personally have never been the type of manager that wants to do the layered cake thing. Like, oh, you're doing great, but have a great day, right? You're like layering it to hide the bad news. No, let's talk about all the things that are working here. Let's talk about everything that you want to do here. And then let's separately address the negative things. Let's resolve that issue. And then we can move on. And that way it doesn't feel like it was lost in this positive, negative atmosphere. It was a negative atmosphere. And we talked through it. It was very direct because because we're operating in this remote first environment, it is a little bit awkward sometimes to deliver it through a screen. Whereas maybe in a room, you would have been able to pick up on a little bit social cues. You're waiting for the right time if you're around them. in the social world, you're scheduling the negative feedback, right? And that feels a little bit different. It may, you're thinking about it all day. They're thinking about it all day. You know it. So I separate it early morning. Let's just get through it. We talk about it, continue the day. That's the way I've done it, which has had some success. And I've done a 360 feedback from my team, and they seem to like the way that operates.
Yeah, I love that. Clear is kind when it comes to feedback. And it's so hard because it's the company you're at really dictates the feedback culture. Are people open to giving and receiving feedback frequently in a non-personal manner? But really, let's get better. Let's root cause problem solve. Let's do a post-mortem. I find that even like cross-functional partners are the hardest to give feedback to. Hey, on this project, and seems like you gave us the specifications like the day before you needed it. How do we fix this in the future? But really focusing on the issue rather than the person. But I think the degree of feedback too on your legal team is also, is it really serious? Is it a small pointer? Personally, stay away from Slack or Microsoft Teams chats when it comes to feedback. Number
Right.
one, that could just like feedback water balloons coming at you at random. And people want to hear feedback when they're ready to hear it. Otherwise, it's absolutely useless. And so I find also just, hey, is there a time next week we can talk about some feedback or talk about some feedback about how this project went? Because then it really shifts people's mindset into, oh, I'm in the driver's seat here. I'm going to tell you when works for me. And so when I show up to that feedback meeting, I'm going to be ready for it and in the right headspace.
Megan, when you think about team efficiency and team management, I'd be curious to get your legal tech stack of what are the tools that you basically swear by in your current company and even in prior companies where you felt like, hey, from an efficiency standpoint, it made us way more productive. It helped solve different challenges that you had. I would just be curious to hear about what those look like at Apollo. And then Mike, we'll kick that question to you.
What an era to be a legal tech nerd. I just am a super legal tech nerd. I'm loving all of these new tools that come out. And
There's so many, right?
there's so many, right? But also
Yeah.
there's so many that you can trial for free and you can test out. And I think one thing that legal teams can get into a hole of is, oh, I need specialized software for this thing that we're doing. There are specialized legal softwares you probably need. And legal really shouldn't be the team at the company that's driving what ticketing system we use overall, what sort of internal wiki we use overall. So I'm also very cognizant always of the technologies that are being used by our partners. How do we adapt and use them at the right time? And then separately of the technologies that we want to be at the forefront of, contract management, outside billing, AI contract markup tools that are super cool. I'm really into GC AI right now, which is a AI platform really made for legal teams, and it's bespoke to be super useful. I've used it for everything for like our team mission to markups on contracts to emails back to a partner. We use a contract management software platform. We use SpotDraft. I've used Ironclad in the past. We use a ticketing system that's no code, low code, specific for legal teams. But I'm really excited around all these tools around AI efficiency, including one that we're trialing that will integrate with your Slack and respond to questions that people post into a public Slack channel with answers from your FAQ bank. So the number of times we get questions about how do I submit a contract, those kind of things. How do I get the most low value things that our team does off our plate?
All right. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna need the name of that one because
It seems
because
like
I feel
someone
like
wants, yeah, on top of
yeah,
that too, Megan, it seems like someone wants to hear about the ticketing system that you talked about. I don't know if you want to share it, but feel free.
Yeah, so the ticketing system we use is streamlined, but I think a lot of legal teams have success in using Jira. If your company uses Jira, or maybe your company uses Zendesk even. I've heard legal teams use Zendesk. There's a couple tools out there that will integrate to Slack though and do like automatic Slack responses based on your FAQ bank. Those are the ones I'm trialing now, and I'll let you know how they go.
All right. Mike, what about you? What's your
I,
stack look like?
I need to know that last one with Slack because I feel like a broken record sometimes, right? And we're essentially doing pretty like low level brainless work. We're like, here's how to submit the contract. This is where you go for this, and especially for kind of repeat questions as new sales folks come in, that they're just newer. So of course they're going to ask that question, right? There's no historical knowledge or database or things that they can go into. We can almost create that. Yeah. So I'll focus in on some of the AI uses right now. We know that DocuSign acquired Lexion, so we've been a DocuSign CLM user for about the last 2 or 3 years. I'm really excited about some of the features that they have coming up because of their integrations with Lexion. I think that's a lot of that is going to be rolling out in January. I'm not trying to make it sound like an infomercial for them, but just really, I'm more than anything curious about what features are going to come out that we don't even know can be useful right now. And then for the first time, we piloted a bunch of different AI, LLM, and Gen AI piloting software. We do have, we're a G Suite company that's basically we're working off of Google Docs and that sort of thing. So we did try out the Gemini, and that's something that we just signed a enterprise contract with. And what I was a little bit skeptical at first, and I was just like, can this be used for contract review? I have found it to be scarily accurate. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're doing diligence and you're pulling a 100-page contract, and you're just like, you can do a control F and try to find the termination for convenience, or you can type in what are the termination for convenience rights in this contract. It will not only point you to where it is, so then you can trust but verify. It will point you to where it is. It will give the interpretation and then the other clauses that it may affect. So if termination for convenience is 5.1, it will say, hey, termination for convenience was also addressed in this other thing that talks about non-appropriation. Also brought up in this other thing that talked about they'll terminate even if they have the right to terminate for whatever other reason. So I just found it to be, it quite literally provided the answer to me faster than I could scroll down to the section of where it was in that contract. So again, I'm not going to blindly copy and paste that as the answer, but in terms of making you faster, I think a lot of these tools, and then similarly like Superhuman in terms of email, has been fantastic for us in terms of creating automated responses, scheduling responses for later, separating into different workflows. It's just overall has made, and I think aside from legal, the entire C-suite faster.
That's awesome. Before, it looks like we have 5 minutes. So one thing I would be curious to pick your brains on is, I know each of you guys have leveraged contractors in the past for overflow work and different types of use cases, but I'm just curious, what prompted those situations for you, Megan, and any best practices in terms of making that actually work for your legal team and increasing efficiency?
Yeah, I just love working with contractors because they're that great middle ground of, I don't know if we have enough work here yet, but I really want someone embedded who understands the business, the team, our ways of working, and not off on an island outside counseling on their own. And I have used contractors at every single company, and I've started with contractors, but I've also ended with contractors. Hey, contractors at the beginning help make a proof point to, I need to actually resource this more. I've got high volume, we need to plug a hole. But contractors, after you already have a team built out, can be phenomenal around like volume control. Hey, we know that end of quarter, we're going to get a bunch of the same customer agreements, and sometimes it's unpredictable. I want to be able to have a lever I can pull. Somebody I've already trained up in our template agreement who can just plug right in for that week and a half, 2 weeks when we're really busy end of quarter. And I don't have to worry about training them all up all over again, getting them Slack access because they're already here. They already get it. They already know the players. I also make one plug for, in this era of doing more with less, I don't know any legal team that says, hey, I'm feeling super well staffed. Everyone can go on vacation. We've got coverage and it's all going to work out. No, we're all just on that edge of skating, being able to get today's work done, but who knows what tomorrow brings. So when things naturally come up in the course of life, you have a parental leave, somebody needs to take a short-term disability leave, there's a death in the family, like you don't want those personal life moments for someone to create work firestorms that they feel bad about, that they have to go clean up later when they eventually come back. I think sometimes we lose the humanity of these are people's lives on our teams. And so how do we buffer them to let them have lives and be humans? And when these things happen, the business doesn't fall apart. And I'll even use myself as an example. I had some great contractors providing different coverage pieces around their subject matter expertise when I went on a maternity leave, and I was so grateful.
That's awesome. Mike, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I just see the poll just came out talking about 10 free hours. So it's first talent engagement on Lawtrades. Like that's how I got started. I was like 10 hours. All right, though that I could do something with that if I give them a contract. Let's actually see how it goes. And I just love the idea of the on-demand legal talent. And we talked about like perusing through resumes and setting up panels to interview folks, right? What I liked, especially and I did scour through a bunch of different companies and landed on Lawtrades just because I like that. Similarly, I told them what we were looking for. They put a few people in front of me. We had the 15 to 20-minute chats with them, found somebody that was culturally aligned that I thought could do the job, and I had the availability. And then all I really had to do was bring them in and then give them a really good playbook. So in terms of when it works, in my mind, I think it works when you give them direction. So with our playbook, they're able to say, all right, these are the finance and business terms that we typically will agree with. It's almost as if to everyone else, they believe, outside folks believe they're speaking to a Flock legal employee. But to us, we know that we're getting the support through a law trader that's helping and that is negotiating those contracts in our same style. And I think that's important for continuity. And so far has been fantastic.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. And before we leave, I'd be curious if there's one parting advice that you want to leave the audience with in terms of any key lessons you want them to leave with when it comes to hiring and building a team. So I'll leave it to you, Megan, and then Mike.
Yeah, I guess like parting words on kind of team building is I always like to ask what needs to get done. That drives the hiring. And then secondly is where does it need to sit? I think sometimes it can be really tempting to build out a legal team that's legal first. Oh, legal needs this, legal needs that. But really, hey, we as a company need XYZ. Here are 3 different places it can sit.
Mike, any parting words for you?
Yeah, just ending with a sports analogy. The great Wayne Gretzky, they asked his dad, what makes your son so great? And he says, my son is great because he skates to where the puck is going to be, not to where it's been. So when you think about planning your team and what the structure is going to look, the hierarchy, the hiring, making the case, you have to think about where my company is going to be in 6 months, in a year, because it's going to take time to ramp and scale that person up and they're going to need to build the boat as you're rowing it, right? So think about and make the case to the rest of your team, to your executive team, as you think about budget, like this is where we're going to be. We need to make that hire today so that we're ready for that.
That's awesome. What a good analogy to end this conversation on. And just wanted to say thanks so much, Megan and Mike. I hope everyone that's still on this webinar could definitely shoot them a LinkedIn invite. Let's all stay connected. Thanks again, Shai and the in-house community for letting us moderate this discussion. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And thanks again.
I love this community. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful Tuesday and see you at the next webinar. Take care, everybody.